Next, we will talk about process scheduling. Scheduling decides the order in which the process would be executed. Okay. So, in a single processor system, only one process can be run at a given point of time. So, any others they have to wait till the CPU becomes free and it can be rescheduled. The objective of the multiprogramming is to have some process running all the time so that you can utilize or make maximum use of CPU. The idea is simple here. A process is executed until it must wait, typically for completion of its IO request. So in other computer system, the CPU would be it would be idle. So all this waiting time is that whenever the CPU is idle, the waiting time is wasted. That is, no useful work is done in this waiting period. So with the multi-programming, we try to use this time productively. So how that can be done is like several processes will be kept in the memory at one time. Then when one process has to wait, what will your operating system do is it takes the system away from that process and it would give the CPU to another process. And this pattern it continues. Whenever a process it wants a IO or some interrupt occurs, so simply the CPU would be taken from that and given to the another process. Okay, so every time one process has to wait, the another process can take the use of CPU. Now, scheduling of this kind is a fundamental operating system function. So, almost all computer resources are scheduled before use. Of course, the CPU is the primary computer resource. So, its scheduling is central to your operating system design. So, here in this topic, in process scheduling, we will see basic CPU scheduling concepts and CPU scheduling algorithms. Okay, so first we will study about CPU IO burst cycle. Okay, this is the diagram for understanding CPU and IO burst. Okay, so the process execution it consists of a cycle of CPU execution and IO wait. So processes they alternate between these two states. Either it would be execution or it would be IO wait, waiting for some IO to be occurred or completed. Okay. So process execution it begins with the CPU burst. That means process execution it would be the process would be loaded into the main memory and CPU would be allocated to that and it would start executing. So that CPU burst would be then followed by the IO burst. Here you can see right IO burst. So what will be done here is like IO burst. Your process would be waiting for some IO to be occurred, and again once the IO is finished, again it would be executed, and again it would be waiting for some IO, and this process continues. First the CPU burst, then comes the IO, then again CPU, then again IO, and this process continues. Okay, and again we have to understand here this process has to terminate with the execution. That means it has to end with CPU burst itself. Okay, that means the final CPU burst it ends with the system request to terminate the execution. Okay, the duration of the CPU burst have been measured extensively. They vary greatly from process to process and from computer to computer. Okay, the, so if you could see in this diagram, say this is for something related to the file. Okay, so say suppose the process it had start executed. That means CPU burst has been started. So say some load and store operation, add operation has been done. Okay. The next instruction here is in that particular process is read from the file. This file is nothing but again IO operation, right? So to this read from file function to occur, so you have to wait for that file to be open and then read, right? So this is your IO wait, IO burst now. So CPU has executed load and add instructions, then it understands that read from file instruction is there. That means it has to open that file and it has to read. That is nothing but a IO operation. So now your CPU burst or CPU cycle would be ended and IO cycle would be started. And say suppose that particular file has been opened and read, and now what will happen is once that file has been read, your IO has been completed. Now what has to be done again? Now again you have to go back to the program and it has to start executing. So once it is done, there are again some instructions like store, increment, index. We'll not bother about these things. We'll simply understand that. So some operations would be done on the file, and you have to write something into the file. Now to write something into the file, again it is a IO operation. So CPU execution has to end here, then IO operation has to be started. That means file some data has to be written onto that particular file. So once that is done, again your CPU burst would be continued. That means the instructions from the program after your writing into the file would be executed, and this process continues till your the last thing is your CPU burst. It has to end with the CPU burst itself. Okay, so this is about your CPU IO burst cycle. Next, we will study about CPU scheduler. Okay, what is a CPU scheduler? So whenever the CPU becomes idle, the operating system it must select one of the process in the ready queue to be executed. So the selection of the process it is carried out by which scheduler? It is your CPU scheduler or the short-term scheduler, right? So the scheduler it selects the process from the processes in the memory which are ready to execute and allocates the CPU to this one, CPU to the process. So we had already seen this one, CPU scheduler or short-term scheduler. So the another thing you have to understand here that the processes, how your ready queue, how the processes would be taken from the ready queue is based on some algorithms, right? So these algorithms we'll see in the future classes. Okay. So this is about your CPU scheduler. Next is preemptive scheduling. The meaning of preemption is like stopping. Okay, stopping. Preempt means stop. Or we can also say preemptive is nothing but interrupting. Okay, interrupting or stopping, something like that. Okay. So, your CPU scheduling decisions they may be taken place under some situation. CPU scheduling decisions in the sense how the process has to be selected and how they have to be allocated CPU. So these decisions can be taken under some situations. The situations are when your process it switches from running state to the waiting state. That means your process is executing and it is waiting it is waiting for some IO or creation of some um, child process or something like that. So the first one is like when a process switches from its running state to waiting state, that means execution state to waiting state. Second one, when a process switches from the running state to ready state, this is when your interrupt occurs. Okay. So the third one is when a process switches from waiting to the ready state. That means the IO operation has been completed. Now it has to go back to the ready queue. The last one when the process terminates. This you know. Let me get you the process state diagram so it would be easier for understanding. Okay, here is your diagram for process state. So let's talk this once again, like how your process has to be taken from the ready queue and how the CPU has to be allocated. So this thing it would be done based on certain situation or some circumstances. So those are, so the first one is like when the process it switches from running to waiting state. That is your process which is in this running state to this waiting state. So this is your first condition. Okay. So whenever a process goes from running to waiting state, that means some for some IO operation it is going. Okay. The second one is like when the process switches from running to ready state. So running to ready state, this one. So this is whenever a interrupt occurs. The third one, when the process switches from waiting to waiting to ready. This means some IO event has been done. I'm sorry, this is the third one, right? Okay, this is the third one. And the last one, when the process terminates here. Okay, so here we have to understand that in the first, okay, before that, let's first talk about preemptive and non-preemptive scheduling. So as we all know, preemptive means to stop, right? So preemptive scheduling, what will happen here is whenever the process is running, it would be forcibly removed. Okay? In the preemptive scheduling, the process will be forcefully removed. Understand this one. In the non-preemptive scheduling, what will happen is the process, it will voluntarily give up the CPU. Okay? In the preemptive scheduling, the process would be forcefully stopped and CPU would be taken away from it. Okay, this is preemptive. In the non preemptive, what will happen is the process voluntarily gives up the CPU. Now, let us understand out of these four situations where we can say that it is preemptive scheduling and where it is non preemptive scheduling. So, first one will take the situation when a process switches from running state to waiting state. So, this is here. So, from the process whenever it is running, it goes to a waiting state. When it will go, it would go when it is when it wants the IO operation. Now, who wants the IO operation? It is the process which wants the IO operation to be performed, right? The process needs some input output operation so that it can be executed or it can continue its execution. Now, in this case, we are not forcefully taking the CPU away from that process, right? The process needs IO device. So what the process does, it voluntarily gives up the CPU in this case, right? So in the first case, we say that it is non-preemptive scheduling. Okay, it is non-preemptive. We'll take the second example. When the process switches from running state to ready state. So running to ready state, this one. So whenever a interrupt occurs. Okay. So say suppose we'll talk about the situation two here. The process is executing. Okay. The process has been given the CPU and it is executing. Say whenever it is executing, a interrupt occurs. Okay. And your CPU, what it will do is like in this situation, it will stop executing the process. That means it will preempt the process. It means like your CPU is now stopping the process from execution. So why? Because a interrupt has occurred and say suppose it is of higher priority. Now in this situation the CPU has to service that particular interrupt, right? So the second situation whenever the interrupt occurs, right, it is not your process that has invoked the interrupt, right? It is the operating system. Now in this case your CPU is forcefully taken from your process, right? Now that we call it as in this situation it is preemptive scheduling. The process has not voluntarily give up the CPU. It is the CPU which has been forcefully taken from the process. Okay, now that is preemptive. The third one, when a process switches from waiting state to ready state. Yeah, here waiting to ready state. When this will come into picture, whenever the process which it was waiting for the IO and the IO has been completed, now it is in the ready status. Okay, so what will happen here is your process, it has completed its IO and now it wants again the CPU, right? Now this we call it as preemptive scheduling. Why? Because it now needs the CPU. The CPU is not yet been given to the process. First it was given, then it voluntarily gave up the CPU for doing some IO. Now again after completion of IO, it needs the CPU. Now this again it comes under preemptive. The last one, when the process terminates. That is, it has successfully completed its execution. Now, what will your process do? It gives up the CPU. It voluntarily gives up the CPU. The CPU is not forcefully taken from the process, right? So, in the situation 1 and 4, we say that it is non preemptive scheduling. That means the process voluntarily gives up the CPU. And the situation 2 and 3, we call it as preemptive. Forcefully, the CPU has been taken away from the process. Okay, so this is about preemptive and non-preemptive scheduling. Preemptive means forcefully taking off the CPU from the process. Preempt means to stop. Okay, non-preemptive means voluntarily, your process voluntarily gives up the CPU. There is no forceful, taking away of the CPU here. Fine. So this is about preemptive and non-preemptive scheduling. The next one we discuss here is dispatcher. Okay, yeah. So it is another component which is involved in the CPU scheduling, that is the dispatcher. Now the work of the dispatcher is to give the control of the CPU to the process which is selected by your CPU scheduler. Understand here? Dispatcher, or the work of the dispatcher, is that whatever your CPU scheduler or the short term scheduler, it has selected a process for execution, right? Now, giving the control of CPU to the process which is selected by your short term scheduler is done by the dispatcher. Okay, so the function, what are the functions which are involved here is switching off the context. That means saving your state of the one process and restoring state of another process. Next, switching to user mode. If suppose it is in the kernel mode, then it has to switch back to the user mode. The third one is jumping to the proper location in the user program to restart the program. So these three are the functions of the dispatcher. So the dispatcher, it should be as fast as possible. Why? Because it is invoked during every context switch or the process switch. Again, the time taken by the dispatcher to stop one process and to start another process, we call it as dispatch latency. Okay, so dispatcher is nothing but it is a module that gives the control of the CPU to the process which is selected by the short-term scheduler or the CPU scheduler. Fine. Now let's talk about scheduling criteria. Okay. So what are the different scheduling criteria? So different CPU algorithms have different properties, and the choice of particular algorithm, it may favor one class of process over another. So we will study these algorithms here now. Okay, before that we'll talk about the criteria of selecting it. So choosing which algorithm to use in a particular situation, so we must consider the properties of various algorithms. So first we'll study about the scheduling criteria. That means which process has to be selected. If suppose there are multiple processes in your ready queue, which process has to be selected for execution, which has to be stopped, when it has stopped, which other process has to be selected for execution. That is process scheduling. So what is the criteria to select those processes? It depends on some algorithms. Now the criteria are CPU utilization, throughput, turnaround time, waiting time, and response time. So the first one is CPU utilization. That means, as we all know, we have to keep the CPU as busy as possible, right? We cannot keep the CPU idle. So CPU utilization, it can range from 0 to 100%. In real systems, it should range from 40% to 90%. Fine. Next one is throughput. If the CPU is busy executing the processes, then the work is being done. So one measure of the work is the number of processes that are completed per unit time, and that we call it as throughput. Throughput is nothing but number of processes that are completed per unit time. So for long processes, this may be one process per hour, or for the short transaction, it may be 10 processes per second. Okay. Next is turnaround time. So the interval from the time of submission of a process till its completion, we call it as turnaround time. I'll repeat again. The interval or the time duration from the submission of the process for execution till its completion, we call it as turnaround time, and it is the sum of periods spent waiting into the memory, waiting for the ready queue, or executing on the CPU and doing IO. Everything combined, we call it as turnaround time. It is not only your execution time, but it is the time that your process spends waiting to get the main memory, then in the ready queue, while executing, and while doing IO operation. Okay. The next one is waiting time. So it is the time. Waiting time is the sum of the periods spent waiting in the ready queue. Waiting time is nothing but the time spent by a process waiting in the ready queue. Okay. The CPU scheduling algorithm, it does not affect the amount of time during which the process executes or does the IO. It only affects the amount of time that a process spends in the ready queue. Okay, so this is your waiting time. The last one is response time. So response time, it is the time taken to start responding and not the time taken for your output. Okay, response time is the time the process takes to start responding and not the time it takes to output the response. That means it is the time spent between the ready state and getting the CPU for the first time. That is your response time. Okay. So these are the different scheduling criteria. That's it for today. We'll conclude our session. Thank you.